What's up, everybody? Going through, like I said in one of our last videos, a lot of these backlog Dimir Shadow videos. Just going to be powering out through some of them. Just thought it would be cool to showcase some of the gameplay. Gives me something to upload in slow days. Gives y'all something to check out if there's nothing like new and crazy going on. So I kind of mentioned before that these are mostly in the middle of testing Shadow of Mortality. Obviously, the list shown here does not include Shadow of Mortality. It's because I think it's always good to take a little time off of testing something. Like if you've been trying out Shadow of Mortality uh, and it's working, maybe it's time to take a league or two to not play Shadow to see if that's still the case. Are you winning because of Shadow of Mortality, or are you winning just because of like the Dimir shell, the counter spell, Drown and Lock, Thoughtseize, Shadow, Murktide aspect? So that's what you're seeing here, just kind of an intermittent league. As always with these backlog leagues, I'm gonna go through pretty quick. We're gonna be like just straight play through, hit the highlights, talk a little bit about sideboarding here and there. Nothing like too crazy, but you'll get the gist of it. So, match number one, we are on the draw. Niku, who I believe is on the trophy leaderboard. Thoughtseize us, yuck. We get some Thoughtseize back. Yargle, Emrakul, 3 lands. So, of course, that naturally means your opponent's going to top deck the Goryo's Vengeance to just kill you in one shot right there. So, nice little turn 2 win out of our opponent. We might have helped them out a little bit off that, but I figured I'd take the Yargle because it was the one that they could cast at some point, and I didn't have a way to deal with that. Sideboarding against like a Yargle deck like this, a Goryo's Vengeance deck, things like Dress Down, I kind of like because you can they can Goryo's Vengeance. You can dress down after the Goryo's Vengeance is resolved. Whatever the thing they get back is loses haste. Flusterstorm can come in, unlicensed hearse, some of that grave hate. But otherwise, we kind of treat it just like a combo deck. Like we've got hand disruption, creatures, and counter spells, and that's usually good against anything that's mildly uninteractive like this. Unfortunately, if we have to mull down to Oblivion and then try to make it happen, probably not going to work out too well. So, as we saw here, we just saw a few like non-functional hands went down pretty low. We don't have to protect this shadow, but I kind of figure I should. Thoughtseize, we see Craggenwick, Cremator, Yargle, a couple's Goryo's Vengeance. So I'm kind of hoping I can like get something going here. Unfortunately, they are just going to be able to like get back Yargle several times because I have to block it or I'm dead. We don't have the mana to counter Yargle or to counter Goryo's Vengeance. Just so happens that they were able to find a Fatal Push too. So, yeah, another Goryo's Vengeance means we gotta lose another Shadow. Hers would be kind of good if we'd had it like 4 turns ago, but now we're just gonna get outvalued by Fable of the Mirror Breaker shenanigans. Yeah, with fun to consider and go to the next game. So definitely a weird string of variants there. Game 1, them top decking the Goryo's Vengeance, kill us on turn 2. Game 2, mulling to Oblivion. Like sometimes that happens and you just have to chalk it up. There's not much you can do about it. But here, really good mulligan to 6. We've got like turn 1 Thoughtseize into turn 2 Shadow. Our opponent's got the Fatal Push, so we could like play out a Shadow, let them kill it, and then get a Murktide after that. But I kind of want to just hang out, see what happens. We could also play a Murktide right there, but if our opponent has an answer to the Murktide, we're just kind of like SOL. We got nothing going on after that. The big top deck, get a Golos for another Cabal Coffers. So if we'd found a land right there, maybe we'd have a good chance. But obviously, our opponent, like Field of Ruining us out, means that we do not have too terribly much going on. Thankfully, we do have like a clock on this Golos. So if our opponent doesn't draw anything live like they did in there, then hey, we just win with a big Murktide in the air. That's got to count for something, right? Let's see. Sideboarding against mono black, like removal spells are coming out. Fatal Push, Dismember, because they're not really doing much. Bringing in Flusterstorm, bringing in Spreading Seas because it answers like not only the Field of Ruin effects, but Cabal Coffers and stuff like that. I could hit the basic Swamp, but with the Field of Ruin, they're gonna be able to get another Swamp, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to like fight over that. I could save it for something like Cabal Coffers, but there's no guarantee that they were gonna have a Coffers. So I'm not a huge fan of like using a spell or not using a spell because of something my opponent may or may not even have in the future if I know I can get some sort of value out of it now. And I kind of needed cards, I needed stuff. All right, so get down Shadow of Mortality. We do have the ability to fight over some of these removal spells. Uh, Opponent's got a Cling to Dust in the yard, so if I get an opportunity to fire off this Drown in the Lock on something I really want to, so like right here, I get to catch a Bloodchief's Thirst with it, which is fantastic. Because my opponent didn't have the mana available to go for the Cling to Dust, like soak up some stuff from the yard. So Shadow of Mortality would be good, except we ditch a Cityscape Leveler into our opponent's yard. It's not even against Tron this time. Like, Cityscape Leveler is just the bane of my existence sometimes. But whatever. On to game 3. Decided to bring in the Hearse here because we saw the Cling to Dust. And that's a card that's like really going to be able to mess up a lot of what I got going on. Thought sees my Flusterstorm. A little surprised they thought sees the Flusterstorm instead of like thought seizing the Murktide or something like that. Turok would have been an excellent draw. Or no, it is an excellent draw because I've got Urborg. That's right. I remember that now. So kick a Turok. Opponent's got all the mana in the world. We don't have a graveyard, but you know, what we do have is a Turok and a will to hit our opponent in the face with said Turok. So as long as we can like dodge a top deck or two, like if we can dodge a top deck or two, maybe get to where we can crew this hearse with like a Shadow of Mortality, then we've got a reasonable shot. Like here, we could play out the Shadow, but I think holding on to the Archmage's Charm is just like better for us. Because we can fight over anything they cast and then untap, play Shadow of Mortality, crew the hearse, and have lethal there. So nice. This is match number 3, I believe. The Yargle, Mono Black, and then this one, yeah. So opponent reveals a Lutri the Spell Chaser and an 80 card deck. So the immediate thought is, okay, they lost a bet to something. And then they turn 1 suspend an Ancestral Vision. So I'm like, okay. Typically when we see Lutri, it's like Grixis or Jeskai Control, something like that. I think those are the decks that are like the most um, repetitive when it comes to like Lutri, because for the most part you've got a whole bunch of redundant like one mana cantrips. You can play Consider, Opt, Serum Visions, Mishra's Bauble, Thought Scour, whatever. You've got like one ofs of a whole mess of counter spells, a few different board wipe options, stuff like that. So it's definitely like one of those color combinations gets you a ton of just redundancy. Here, as we can see, just hoping to get to a point where I can untap with two counter spells, and I feel like I can kind of run from here as long as my opponent doesn't have the card Supreme Verdict right here. But anything else, I would be able to fight with my counter magic. And they decide to go for Urtai Resurrected. So if you haven't seen this card, it's like a 4 mana flash dude. When it enters, you can either counter a spell or destroy a creature. And I think either way, if you do one or the other, your opponent draws a card. You get like a 3/2 body. So it's kind of like a weird frilled mystic. So going into game two, I was expecting full on control. So when they start with this Ragavan, I'm like, okay, I'm dead in the water. I don't even know what else is in their hand. Doesn't matter. Turn one Ragavan. I just boarded out like all my fatal pushes and stuff because hey, what are those gonna do for me against like Jeskai control or four color control? Because we saw Urtai. I think we end up going for yeah, go for a shadow here. Hopefully, I can stand in the way of the Ragavan. If not, if they have a removal spell, then so be it. At least I can get to like Murktide plus Flusterstorm next turn. Jace the Mind Sculptor. Huh. You don't say. So gonna pass back. I'm kind of hoping that my opponent will just like brainstorm instead of bouncing my shadow. They go for Urtai again. We cannot kill or counter the Urtai, but we can at least counter or kill the Ragavan. God, counter, kill, whatever. They do get to brainstorm with Jace, and if you know anything, if you've ever had the pleasure of playing against Jace the Mind Sculptor, you know that Jace's brainstorm is basically like Infect 5 on there as well. Like if they brainstorm twice, game's over. Play out that first Murktide so that when they do inevitably bounce it, I can replay it with enough spells in the yard to make it worthwhile. I also think I probably should have just gone for the thoughts or gone for the uh, shadow attack first. I don't think it's like a big deal, but maybe my opponent would have just like fired off the deluge or something. I don't know. Maybe it would have changed my play there. So they untap, just have a Sphinx's Revelation into bounce my shadow again. So I'm not feeling bad here. Like I get a reasonable attack in on my opponent, make it a 2-turn clock. I can't replay the Murktide, but if they can't deal with the shadow, then maybe we have a chance. Solitude. The 80 card, 1 of deck, hit the Solitude. Okay. Well, it's not great for us, but we're not like super out of the water. Subtlety. They hit Subtlety. So the 80 card singleton deck hit the back to back Evoke Elementals. And now they've got the Memory Deluge in the yard ready to go. And the fatal push. Okay. You remember when their hand was like hallowed moonlight and lose focus, and that was it? Yeah. That was a nicer time. Either way, we go to game three. They're up to 86 cards now post board. So interesting. We again don't really have too much of a game plan because, like I said, game one I expected full on control. Game two they hit me with a turn one Ragavan. So we're just gonna cast spells and see what happens. If our opponent has a more spell centric hand, we could have a reasonable shot. If they miss their second land drop, we could have a reasonable shot. Just thinking out loud. Dang. Dress down just to try to cycle it here, find something else. Even if I top deck a Murktide, I'm not playing it, so I'm kind of okay just dress downing into turn. Sometimes you'll see me dress down at my opponent's second main phase, and that's mostly so that I can untap and play like a Turok or a Murktide or whatever, and not have the ETB counters or triggers stifled. But here, since didn't have a Murktide set up very well, I'm kind of fine not going for it. So we got Cyclist Shark Typhoon. Okay. I'm trying to be a little patient with this unlicensed hearse activation because I really want to be able to counter like a Jace the Mind Sculptor here. All right, so we get a Shadow. We've got Shadow with multiple counter spells backing it up. Hopefully we can just like get through their turn, get back to our turn, have a big Shadow. This is like a punt on my end. I meant to fetch first and then stubborn denial. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, my opponent remanded their own remanded their own prismatic ending before I fetched, so it wouldn't have mattered. But so they kind of saved me from the punt. But either way, we get down Shadow of Mortality, and it gets Shieldred's Edicted. So it is really funny to go from like Hallowed Moonlight and stuff game two to just like Shieldred's Edict, Kaya's Guile game three. Oh, I guess I should talk about that line real quick. So my opponent went for the Shieldred's Edict. I went for Drown. They lose focus. I don't want to sack my Shadow of Mortality, so I'm crewing my hearse in response. I could have eaten a few more things in case I'm worried about like Snapcaster Mage or something. But kind of decided, whatever. We're just going to keep playing. If they had something like Cling to Dust or Memory Deluge in the yard, I'd absolutely eat that. But so we got Fable of the Mirror Breaker, getting Logic knotted. And can we untap and find a removal spell? Nope. All right. Attack in. Should have held on to the land. I really don't think it matters much at this point. Like, you get to a point in the game where you've had like a back and forth over a lot of these plays, and it really doesn't matter if you hold the land because your opponent's at a point where if they draw something, they have to go for it. Like, I'm presenting extremely potent lethal right there. If my opponent finds a removal spell, they cannot not go for the removal spell. All right, so Thought Seize. What do we see off that Thought Seize? We're waiting, we're waiting, we're waiting. We are Fetch Shock. We are thought seizing. All right, so Underworld Cookbook, Goryo's Vengeance, Profane, Tutor, Emrakul. Pretty okay taking the cookbook because I don't want them to immediately ditch an Emrakul, but also because cookbook like sets up things such as Asmorano, Mordecai, and Koldakar, modern staple, patent pending. So just going ahead and like knocking that out of hand can hopefully stifle a lot of their production here. Getting down a quick threat that's able to get ferocious next turn means that hopefully by the time Profane Tutor matters, um, we can be pretty well ahead. Well, it's easy to take Goryo's Vengeance means they'd have to top deck both a way to get Emrakul in the yard and another Goryo's Vengeance to be able to deal with our board. Alas, they did not do that, so we get to go to game 2. Um, I'm pretty sure you all know the sideboard playing against like spell-based combo by heart at this point. Removal spells, Fatal Push, Dismember coming out, uh, counter magic like Flusterstorm coming in, as well as situational stuff. For example, against a lot of these Goryo's Vengeance decks, I might bring in Dress Down just to shut off abilities, shut off like the haste when it comes back into the battlefield. Bringing in like Unlicensed Hearse, any other Grave Hate. I'm bringing in because we saw Cookbook, so they've got Asmo. In this case, they've got Urza Saga 2. We get to fight over the construct tokens of that. So, resolving Profane Tutor. Not sure what they decided to get off of it. Could go ahead and pop but don't really care too much in the face of just a construct. Now that they've got some food going, I'm a little more likely to crack to take out some food, especially if it means I get to untap, have a shadow backed up by double counterspell. So, opponent did not eat the food in response, which makes me wonder like what they have going on. In this case, we are attempting to Goryo's Vengeance and Emrakul into my turn. I kind of don't want that to happen, so I guess we'll fight over it. And now our focus becomes like dealing with Asmo. On 1, it's annoying for sure because like we don't have a ton of threats in the deck, but at the end of the day, I'd kind of rather them kill the shadow than resolve like that Asmo. So if they do end up killing the shadow, whatever. Maybe we'll find another threat. But if they resolve the Asmo, it's like game over. Well, Murktide's a pretty good top deck. Stands in the way of the Daredevil. Not standing in the way very well of a menacing insolent neonate. But I figure if I can find like another threat here, then I can maybe start attacking with this Murktide. But if the threat takes too long, then we might have to use it to block an insolent neonate here. All right, so opponent's going for the double attack. Makes sense because now they get the Daredevil back and they can re-hardcast it. We really do not have anything to get us out of this. Dress down is interesting. It's like we could go to our opponent's turn and dress down and shut off like Menace, but they're going to attack all. We don't have the ability to like draw into another threat to block. We could maybe find a removal spell, but it's very, very. Yeah. If we found a removal spell, we could just kill the neonate anyway. But main phasing gives us the out of finding a threat as well. So we're going to let our opponent hit us in the face once. Maybe find another way to get Shadow online. Nope. Just hold up our counter magic for days. If our opponent doesn't have a third land drop, this is really good for us. Until they do. The opponent's mean. Doesn't want to miss land drops. So expecting Cookbook, yep. Daredevil, yep. Do they have the Asmo? Yep. Second Cookbook, yep. Opponent is going to let us soak up some damage there, which I was kind of surprised by. I figured they would just shoot the shadow and like get the attack in. Not that we're in any sort of a great position here, but them like letting us block gave us a couple like extra outs there. Not a lot, but we take what we can get. Oh, so I believe this is round number 4. We are what? 1-2. Rough start. 1-2, but we got a pretty good hand here. Got Counterspell into Archmage's Charm. You know, I just realized that when I started the recording on this video, I thought that this league did not have Shadow of Mortality in it, but it did. So this must have been right after I started trying out Shadow of Mortality, because I've got the Fiery Islet in here. So it was before the Steam Vents, which was before the Hallowed Fountain. It's kind of interesting to see the progression. So opponent's on Living End. We've got hopefully enough counter spells to fight through. Thoughtseize to take the other Cascade spell, get down a big chunky Murktide. Wish it could be an 8-8 instead of a 7-7 with opponent at 8 life, but ultimately, if you throw enough counter spells at Living End, they might lose the game. Maybe. Yet again, spell-based combo, removal out, counter spells in, Grave Hate in this case. You do see spell-based combo that the Grave Hate doesn't come in against, like Creativity. I will against Jun Creativity if you're expecting Ren and 6, Bitter Reunion, and Persist, stuff like that. But against like just Ren and 6 out of the normal creativity lists, not really where I want to be. So opponent misses the land drop, eventually finds it, does go for the grief eventually here. So if their 3 cards are Violent Outburst, Force of Negation, blue card, kind of sucks we couldn't get our mana available. Could also go for the Turok there and like force my opponent to have those 3 cards again. But I really don't want them to have like Violent Outburst and Charlotte's Agent. Like if I go for not casting the Turok, if they on my upkeep cast a Violent Outburst, they have to have blue card, Force of Negation. If I put the Turok on the battlefield, blue card, Force of Negation still beats me, but now they add to the mix Violent Outburst, second Cascade spell of any kind beats me, where it didn't before. So I'm pretty okay with like waiting, making that not beat me, and then eventually I'll find some more lands, get down Turok or get down that shadow of mortality and go from there. So ended up being a 3-2 league. Um, Not bad, but not great. I think that first match, the Goryo's Vengeance Yargle deck just kind of like threw me off my game that entire league. When you have a rough start like that, you really need to take your time to mentally reset. But it is a really good talking point in that it doesn't matter how well you build your deck or um, how great you think your list is, whatever the case may be. There is still a really good chance that you're going to encounter some rough variance that's going to cause you to lose games. And if you dwell on those too much, then it's really going to like pile on mentally. So you really have to just like let them go, accept that they happen. You can't do anything about them. You couldn't predict it, you couldn't play around it. It just went that way. It happens when you flood, it happens sometimes when you get mana screwed. Uh, it happens when you, especially when you mulligan to Oblivion, like no land hand into no land hand. Um, it's just part of it. So whenever you're looking at like your results over a given time period and you're saying, oh, I'm X% against the field and Y% against this deck, um, don't get upset if it's not perfect. If you're not winning like 95% of your matches and you feel like you should be, like, oh, I'm playing the best deck in the format. Why am I not winning everything? Because nobody does. Simplest answer I can give. But this is another one of these backlog Dimir videos. As always, the deck list link below will be to my current Dimir list, not necessarily the one featured in the video. If you're enjoying the commentary, enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button. Please, please, please. Trying to reach that 1,000 subscriber goal so we can start like making more YouTube content and really ramping it up. Otherwise, we'll have a link to like the Twitter down below if you want to know when the streams are going live, as well as the stream link itself, and a link to the Control Freak Discord server. So if you want to come say, hey, check out this video, check out other shadow content and non-shadow content, because some people like just showing up and showing off their cool looking cards. So yeah, take it easy. Y'all have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. Catch you back later.